Alright, this is something that I don't get to do as often as I would like to, so I always take the opportunity when it arises. So this is a preview for BLACKTAIL. Now, I consider myself a bit of a mythology buff because I spent a lot of the years of my youth reading various myths and things, and I got really interested in like all the mythologies of the world, so I'm a huge fan of games that tackle mythological worlds because it's cool to see a visual, interactive representation of these stories that I spent so much time reading. But of all of the various mythologies that video games tend to tackle, Slavic mythology is one of them that is often left by the wayside. You don't see a lot of games that actually have very much of that influence in them. If you're not playing something like Castlevania or Shin Megami Tensei, then there are very few other choices that actually have any significant Slavic influence to them. So it's always nice seeing a game tackle something like this that I'm not really all that familiar with, something that's pretty new to me, and pretty much everything in this game is new to me. I felt constantly just sort of flabbergasted while exploring at all this crazy stuff I'd never seen or heard of before, and that's a really cool feeling from someone that really likes to research mythological worlds. And in BLACKTAIL, you actually play as Baba Yaga, although specifically you play as Yaga, as a 16-year-old before she became the Old Woman of the Woods, the mythological character that we know her as. So it's basically an origin story for one of the most famous Slavic folklore characters that I know of. Gameplay-wise, it focuses heavily on exploration with this really genuinely fascinating world full of all sorts of Slavic mythological references and things, most of which totally went over my head and ended up providing me with a really cool experience because I was constantly, it seemed like every other corner I turned had something weird about it and I didn't know what was going on and had to actually explore myself. They've done a very good job very fully realizing this world that's just full of mythological references, and so to someone that's not very familiar with this particular mythology, it all feels very new and alive and interesting, so the world itself is very cool. Now you are in an early medieval world, so although it is an FPS, there are no guns. Instead, you have your trusty bow as well as your gauntlet on your left hand that gives you various magical powers. The bow is what a lot of the sort of economy, you could say, is based off of, because you have a very strict ammunition economy with the bow, because crafting takes feathers and sticks for the arrows, and you can only hold at first about 9 arrows at a time, so you have to be pretty careful about how you place your shots, making combat in this game a very quick and lethal affair, where you either, do it right and kill the enemies quickly and efficiently, or you run away and try again later. The bow itself is pretty satisfying to shoot. It's got a zoom as well as a charge shot as you'd expect from a video game bow. It works pretty much exactly as you would expect, but it works nicely. And of course you have to craft your arrows carefully to make sure you're conserving resources. And there are loads and loads of resources around the world for you to gather, many of which you use for something else, but we'll get onto that in a little bit. Now this gauntlet, in the demo, the preview build for the game, there's only one power for now that's available, and it is a sort of force push like spell that allows you to just let out this concussive wave of force to do a small amount of damage to enemies in front of you, which is useful because, of course, as a bow user, you need to have some space in between you and some of the melee enemies to help have enough time to actually knock an arrow, draw it, and fire at them. But when you get this power, you also get a special shot for your bow, which is pretty cool. If you hold the bow down, if you charge an arrow and keep it charged, and then press the button that allows you to use this force attack, it fires the arrow and uses this force attack at the same time, and actually turns your bow into what's effectively like a shotgun, just shotgunning a cone of arrows in front of you, hitting all the enemies in a short distance, which is really satisfying and very cool, and also super nice for conserving resources, because if there are like 4 enemies in front of you, each one taking 1 arrow, but instead you can charge up the special and actually take them all out with a single arrow instead of 4 individual ones, that's a really cool thing. So it's useful for both resource conservation and just for general damage and making space in between you and enemies. So there is actually some depth to the combat, even though you mostly just have this bow. Your magical powers combine with it in various ways to give you more options. Hunting seems to be an important part of the game because the game actually teaches you in the tutorial to hunt deer and get some meat from them, and you can then take this meat back to any campfire that's around you and actually cook it with a cute little mini game that allows you to cook the meat, and if you do it successfully, you can then eat the meat and restore your health back to full, and also give you a long-lasting regeneration buff that will continue to restore your health. This is very useful because health restoration effects seem to be kind of at a premium in this game. I think they're going for this hunting aspect to be like the prime way of keeping yourself topped up on HP, and you're not going to be finding tons of like health potions and stuff around the place. It seems like they're going for healing is a kind of difficult exclusive thing to find, so you have to keep your healing close to you, available for when you need it, but you're not going to be like chugging health pots and stuff out in the field. You're going to have some downtime to actually go and restore your health instead, which is a pretty neat idea. There's also an aspect of this sort of manual nature with the save points of the game. The save points are these pretty shrines that you're seeing, and those actually take a resource to use. You can't just walk up to them and save. You have to have one of these red flowers that you can find around the groves in various places to put on the shrine to actually activate it and allow you to save. So it seems like they're going for sort of a survival experience where almost everything takes some kind of resources to properly utilize. It looks like there are also going to be some other things that you can craft out in the field away from things like the campfire, because in the preview we also have an antidote potion that we can use. There are various enemies that can poison you in different ways, especially these big spiders with eyeballs on their abdomens that are kind of terrifying, and those can poison you, so having an antidote is useful. And there are also some characters that may request an antidote, so having the resources to craft them and having them along with you can be useful in various ways. And it seems like they're going to really lean into this concept of survival-y, gather resources from around you to craft various potions and things like that to have with you, both to help yourself and to accomplish various side quests along the way. But in addition to all of this, and your bow and your gauntlet and all that, there's also an entire skill tree sort of system that you access by using a cauldron, because of course you are a witch, probably the witch that's most famous throughout the world, so of course you do have a cauldron that you can mix things with, and this is where the vast majority of those other resources come into play, meaning exploration is extremely important because it actually allows you to strengthen your character in general. Instead of getting like skill points or something like that allow you to go through a skill tree, you actually brew all your various resources together to unlock new nodes on this tree. And it's quite a significant looking tree from what we get access to in the preview. There's actually a lot of different nodes on it, and these are going to be all kinds of things, from new types of potions to develop, to new types of arrows, to upgrades to your various skills. It seems like the skill tree itself is pretty much made up entirely of like interesting and exciting stuff. There's no like 5% crit chance and all those really boring nodes. It seems like all of them affect you in some sort of relatively major way. So gathering all these resources is going to be very important. And one of the main resources that you can gather are these teeth. And I'm not entirely sure what the significance of these teeth are, but you can find them in various hard to find chests around the world, and these seem to be one of the main things that you need for almost all nodes, along with other various miscellaneous resources depending on what you're trying to unlock at that time. So this is going to be where a lot of the gameplay comes from, I feel, is actually finding and gathering these various disparate resources to empower yourself at this cauldron, which is pretty cool because that means there's a lot of fun stuff to find, and you're very heavily rewarded for exploring a very interesting world. There's also going to be some other stuff apparently that we don't get a taste of in the preview, but it is on the store page, something involving hexes and also a magical broom. I'm not entirely sure what all of these are going to be, but I'm excited to find out because that sounds awesome. I hope we get to fly on it. There also seems to be a very significant morality system in the game. It actually underlines the whole game. Just about every choice you make has some sort of moral consequence, and you actually have an entire dedicated morality menu that shows you exactly where you stand from good to evil, which I think is pretty cool because this is Baba Yaga we're talking about, and there are like thousands of legends surrounding this character, and there are, I think you could say, like 2 major archetypes of who she is in real life, all the various legends. And I think the point of this morality system is to allow you to decide which of those major versions of her myths you actually become. Right, because there's like the nature goddess almost version of her that's like a seeress that helps heroes out on their adventures and helps them find things that they need at that time, who's very benevolent and, knows all in her area of the forest. And then there's the other version of her that's like the dark, twisted crone in her chicken-legged hut that eats children and hexes everyone that she comes across. So I think the whole point of this morality system is to actually incorporate both sides of the myths and actually allow you to be either or. And in fact, I think they're deliberately trying to invoke the third sort of mythological version of her, which is that instead of just being one character, they're actually a trio of twin sisters that all take the same name and each have their own hut. That happens in some of the earlier myths. So I think they're purposefully invoking this by centering the plot around the fact that you have a twin sister that you're looking for. So I think they're sort of all 3 of the major versions of this mythological character in real life are present here in some form. pretty much every Baba Yaga that you can think of is here in some way, and I think that's actually a really, really cool way to do a sort of origin story for a mythological character, is to try and represent almost every type of myth that that character represents in real life and actually allow you to choose between the paths they take to see which one they become. But of course the real star here is the narrative, the story, and the world itself. It's absolutely fascinating to someone that doesn't know a whole lot about Slavic folklore, and I have a feeling that to even someone that is actually very interested and knows a lot about this sort of folklore, you will find a lot to like here, because it seems very well realized visually, and the voice acting for the main characters is really good. The voice acting for your character, is great, and there's another character that's just called The Voice. I'm assuming in the full version of the game that we'll know more about who she is eventually, and her voice actress is absolutely fantastic. She has a really great attitude, she's very funny, very witty, and really just sort of evil and mean sounding, and just really fun to listen to. And like I said, the world itself is really fantastic. It's just so inventive and crazy and weird. To someone that doesn't really know what a lot of this stuff is, it seems like every time you turn a corner there's something that you're like, what is that? And you just have to go and look, because you have no idea. And they've done a fantastic job of making a very colorful, active world that's just full of all sorts of weirdness, and I can't wait to explore more of it. So that is my personal preview of BLACKTAIL. This is something to absolutely keep an eye on if you're a fan of FPS, if you're a fan of narratively focused games, if you're a fan of mythological games. There's a lot to like here, and it does a lot right. You know, the combat is frantic and fun, the powers look like they're going to be really cool, the character progression and exploration are tied together in a way that makes them really enjoyable, and the world and voice acting and characters and story all tied together to be really fascinating and something that I want to see more of and explore myself. So this is absolutely something to look forward to, and is most definitely something that I'm going to be covering the full version of when it releases. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that will be, because there is currently no set release date, but I will definitely be covering this sooner rather than later, hopefully, when it comes out. So that's it for 2021, I guess. I wanted to end the year on a high note, on something that I was looking forward to for hopefully next year, because I think that's a good way to sort of end it off when this year has been pretty rough for a lot of us. So there you go. Everybody have a safe and happy New Year's. Have a good time going into 2022, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.